Hello everybody. So, heart rate monitors. Why would you use a heart rate monitor? Which type of heart rate monitor should you purchase? And how would you go about using it? Okay, so firstly, why would you need a heart rate monitor? Well, as a runner or an endurance athlete, such as a triathlete, it's very useful in terms of being able to gauge your training efforts and your recovery rate, and in terms of building what we call your aerobic engine, which is the fundamental of all endurance success. Measuring your heart rate and getting constant feedback in real time is absolutely crucial, in my opinion. So you can do it by just perceived effort, but in my experience, this, particularly for novice athletes, this can be very, very difficult to gauge. So if I ask people, for example, a novice runner to give me a rate of perceived exertion between 0 and 10 for their efforts, they really have no idea where to start because they don't know what 10 feels like, and they don't even know what 5 feels like or 3 feels like. It's completely arbitrary, and they just don't know how to speculate on that, in my experience. So giving them a heart rate figure to work with gives them some idea of where they should be training at, what kind of intensity, in terms of building up their aerobic fitness. And most people, most runners are actually doing most of their training at far too high a heart rate, and they're not really achieving very much for that reason. So if you look at most of the elite athletes, they're doing most of their training, probably 80 to 90% of their training, at a heart rate which for you or I would seem incredibly low compared with the speeds that they're going at. So you compare that with your average recreational runner who does most of his training, at least over 50% of his training, at a heart rate that is not really developing his or her aerobic engine to its best advantage. So having the heart rate monitor just gives you a guide as to where you should be training, what sort of intensity, and we'll just look at that a little bit further later. So that's the main benefit. It's great for monitoring health and fitness generally, because a higher than normal heart rate will often may well indicate that you're stressed, or that you're not eating properly, or that you're not fully recovered, or that you're going down with an illness. All of these things are potentially revealed by a higher than normal heart rate. Of course, it may just be that you're training at too high an intensity, intensity that you're not quite used to, and therefore your heart has risen in response. But so those are the main reasons why we need a heart rate monitor, and I'm a great advocate of them, having used it myself for the last 25-30 years, I suppose, since they were quite new things in the earlier days of the running booms. And I've myself prepared for ultra marathons, running races of all distances, in fact, and Ironman triathlon, and I've used the heart rate monitor very successfully to gauge my training levels. Excuse me. So what kind of heart rate monitor should you purchase? Well, you don't need to spend a lot of money on a heart rate monitor. Really, you just need one that will give you an accurate reading. And this basically boils down to two brands, which are Polar or Garmin. because all the other brands fail to, in my experience, to give accurate, consistent readings. And certainly all the wrist activated monitors that don't have chest straps attached will be totally worthless in terms of gauging your heart rate in the long run, particularly the higher heart rates. So Garmin and Polar are the ones to go for. Polar is probably slightly ahead in my estimation in terms of accuracy, and you can get very cheap Polar heart rate monitors that will cover everything you need basically, and even enable you to set zones and alarms. So if you go outside of your zone, the alarm will go off, and you can get one of these for probably less than £40, basic model, and that's what I recommend to start with. So obviously got a wrist monitor to give you a reading, and you've got a chest strap that will go around your chest, obviously. So that is those are the best two makes to get. So how would you go about using a heart rate monitor? So the method that I've favoured with both my own training and with my clients is the Maffetone method, a method devised by an American GP, running coach and runner, Dr. Philip Maffetone, who devised his own formula for heart rate training zones. So you've probably heard about the 220 minus your age formula, which is applied sort of willy-nilly across the board by most health and fitness professionals. However, it's extremely inaccurate in my experience and varies enormously from individual to individual. So particularly in people who've done a lot of endurance training, if you take 220 minus your age, for example, myself, 220 minus my age gives a maximum heart rate of 159, whereas I regularly hit 185, 188 at the end of a hard 5k run, and I'm not dead, and I suspect there's probably a few beats left in me beyond that, so my maximum is probably 190, and I'm not 30 years old, I'm 61 years old, so it's completely inaccurate. And if I was to measure my zones and apply them in training according to the 220 minus my age theory, then I would be training completely inappropriately. So the Maffetone method, which I favour, works on basically 180 minus your age, and I found this to be very accurate for most people. So for me, that would be 180 minus 61, gives me a maximum heart rate, working heart rate for staying in my aerobic zone of 119. Now the Maffetone formula actually permits for this to be adjusted slightly according to your extent of athletic experience and according to recent injuries, recent illnesses, etc., because these are all reflective of your current aerobic fitness. So I would normally add 5 onto that. If you've been recently injured, you would take 5 off it. If you've suffered frequent colds, you would take 5 off it. If you're neither of those things, but you're just kind of an average guy or girl who's you know, you've not got years of experience of running, but you've not been going down with lots of injuries and colds, then you just stick to the figure. So the figure in my case would be 119. I'd add 5 on to make it 124, and then I would work down 10 beats below that. So 114 to 124 would be the zone that I would try to stay in to maximize my level of aerobic fitness. And this aerobic base is really where you need to be focusing